Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting of January 13, 2015. Happy New Year to everyone. I'd like to thank the Garden Club for flowers they always provide for our meetings. Roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Here.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Here.
Mayor Ruane.
Here. David Waltering, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, announcements. I would like to welcome our new police chief, Ed Barberini, to his first meeting of the City Council. Ed started the first of this month. Welcome, Chief. Presentations, there aren't any this evening. Review of the agenda. Anything going on? Okay. Approval of the minutes of the regular City Council meeting of December 9th, 2014, and special council meeting of December 22nd, 2014. Any errors, corrections, omissions? Seeing none, they be approved as submitted. The consent calendar, all items are considered routine or implemented earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested by council member, citizen, or staff. Any action on the consent calendar?
Move to approve. Second.
Motion is second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing. We do have a public hearing this evening. We're going to hold a public hearing, waive the first reading, and introduce an ordinance approving a development agreement with Castle Companies for construction of 10 new homes in the Crestmore neighborhood.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. On tonight's agenda is the introduction of an ordinance approving a development agreement with Castle Companies to build 10 replacement homes in the Crestmore neighborhood. We have 3 main topics for my presentation tonight. The first topic is, what's a development agreement and why is the City Council looking at it now? Second topic is, what are the key provisions of the development agreement? And the third topic is, what are the next steps? Now, it's important to note, as I mentioned at the Planning Commission meeting last week, that we are not here tonight to discuss or review the actual homes, their design, or the plans. There will be actually 3 separate opportunities for the public to provide input on that. One of them is a community meeting on the 21st of this month. There will then be architectural review and a Planning Commission meeting, with the Planning Commission making the final decision on the design. David, after I'm finished with my presentation, will touch on those meetings when I'm done. So I see that we do have some of the residents who were at the Planning Commission meeting last week when this was considered. Many of those residents, there were about 25 of them, at the Planning Commission meeting provided input, asked questions that staff answered, hopefully completely and thoroughly. And then after having a public hearing, the Planning Commission did review the development agreement and ordinance and recommended approval. So let's take a second and back up and talk about what a development agreement is and what the purpose of it is. And generally, a development agreement is just a contract that's adopted by ordinance between the city and a developer. And the purpose of it is for the mutual benefit of both parties, both the city and the developer. The benefit to the city, several benefits to the city. One of them is that the developer will commit to building all of the homes on an agreed schedule. Second benefit is that they'll agree to certain development standards and processes that the city will put in place. The benefit to the developer is that the city can't change the rules in the middle of the game, so to speak. Once it started, the city can't say, well, we've changed our minds. We want to reduce the allowable size of this house from 2,000 square feet to 1,500. So the city knows what it's getting and the developer knows what they're getting. As you may recall, the city did an extensive RFP process, request for proposals, to solicit proposals from a number of qualified developers to rebuild all of these 12 homes. And the city received many good proposals, but ended up selecting Castle at a public meeting as the company that was best able to fulfill all of the city's goals of completing those homes. And as you also may recall, Castle's offer of the price to pay for those lots wasn't the highest, it wasn't the lowest, it was somewhere in the middle. So after the city did that, the city and Castle And then separately, Castle and PG&E entered into a purchase and sale agreement. And they opened an escrow by which Castle would buy the 7 lots from PG&E and the 3 lots from the city. Castle has made a deposit into escrow, and escrow is scheduled to close actually in just a few months, April of this year, April 14th. One of the conditions of closing that escrow is that the city approve and adopt an ordinance and approve a development agreement by the end of January. So that's why this item is coming to you this evening, is because there's that requirement in the purchase and sale agreement. Let's take just a second and look at what are the key provisions of the development agreement. And first of all, and importantly, the developer has committed to completing all of the homes within 6 to 9 months of issuing a building permit. And what that means is that most of them will be done by the end of the year, some sooner. As far as fees are concerned, the developers agreed to pay all of the city fees. There's no discounts or breaks, no changes to what's authorized by the city ordinances. And then thirdly, the house size and style are required to be all in accordance with the city's existing ordinances. So the developer can't come in and say they want an exception, they want a variance, they want a use permit to build a bigger house. They're agreeing to build those houses at that size which are under the current ordinance, unlike, for example, some of the other residents of the neighborhood who were able to build houses that were larger than the FAR. The purpose of that requirement in the development agreement is for those new 10 lots sort of infill in different places to blend into the existing surroundings. Now, since the Planning Commission meeting last week, we've made 2 minor revisions which the developer has agreed to that you have in front of you to the development agreement. The first one is we sort of changed the description of the project throughout just to make it clear that it applies individually to each of the 10 homes because they're going to be built on slightly different schedules. And previously, the developer had asked that once each home is sold, we terminate the development agreement with respect to that particular home, and we said that's fine. So we wanted to make sure that the converse applied, which is at the beginning it also applies to each of those homes individually. The second change we made was a slightly longer construction period, just by 60 days, for 3 of those homes. And the reason for that is because there was some geotechnical evaluation. It was discovered that those homes that were there before are actually on 50 or 60 or more feet of fill, which is somewhat more difficult situation than exists for the other 6 homes. So we wanted to make sure, and the developer wanted to make sure they had enough time to fully evaluate that and complete those homes. All right, so we've talked about what development agreements are, what this one says, what are the next steps. So after David makes a few brief comments, we're going to take some questions from all of you, if you have any. You'll open the public hearing, we can respond to any questions, close the public hearing, and then hopefully introduce the ordinance approving the development agreement. It is scheduled for adoption at the next City Council meeting in 2 weeks, and that'll be on your consent calendar, barring any issues that come up. In the meantime, Castle has already submitted plans to the building department, and the staff is already checking those plans. David can fill in the details of what happens next then with the upcoming community meeting, architectural review, and the Planning Commission. So that concludes my portion of the report. Take it away, David.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Mr. Mayor and City Council members, next steps would be that we're going forward at the January 21st meeting that the City Attorney mentioned. It's a neighborhood meeting. It's an opportunity really for the Castle Company to introduce themselves to the neighbors and to present the preliminary plans, the submitted plans for this project, and to receive initial input. So at this point, in accordance with the schedule that you have in the development agreement, Castle Companies has submitted their plans for the project. Those plans are in review at this time, and we'll have the neighborhood meeting, which is the Castle Companies meeting, an opportunity to introduce themselves at that meeting. After that, we'll have an Architectural Review Committee meeting. That's a city meeting and a standard process. The entitlement that's being requested is an architectural review permit. That Architecture Review Committee meeting will be held at City Hall. That meeting is scheduled for February 12th. After that meeting, the Architecture Review Committee will be presenting a recommendation to our Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission meeting is tentatively scheduled for March 17th. In accordance with the overall schedule, we'd be expecting that the developer, Castle Companies, would be submitting construction documents for plan review within 10 days of the Planning Commission hearing. Then there would be a review process of those construction documents, and we would expect that a building permit could be issued for the individual lots. Again, this is a subdivision that's been in place since 1958. And the objective here is to provide replacement home construction of these homes that were destroyed during the explosion and fire in 2010. So the intent is to issue permits for these homes in May of this year, and as our city attorney indicated, the overall time frame for completion would be that within 6 to 9 months of issuance of the building permit, all of the 10 individual homes would be constructed. The developer has agreed, and the city will be requiring that the pre-disaster development standards and our city's residential design guidelines will be adhered to, no exceptions, no use permits, no variances, no exceptions. So the plans that have come in are being reviewed now, not only for their architectural style, colors, materials, and treatments, but to also make sure that these plans adhere to the development standards, pre-disaster development standards, and our residential design guidelines. So that's a quick overview, a brief overview of our next steps. We would expect that if the development agreement goes forward and the project moves forward, that the homes would be completed sometime toward the end of this year and be ready for occupancy. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Good. Any questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Ken?
Through the Chair, David, not having a chance to see the Planning Commission meeting, but could you give an idea, saying that there were, did you say there were about 25 residents there?
Yes.
Can you give an idea what the questions were or possible concerns that were given at the meeting?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think one of the concerns that we heard was that this project move forward in a timely manner, that indeed the schedule that's laid out in the development agreement is adhered to. So I think that was a clear comment that came forward. Another comment that came forward was a concern about when would construction occur, when typically would construction occur. And I think a desire to see the construction activity occur during the week, weekdays, Monday through Fridays, and not on the weekends and not during holidays. So I think that's something else we heard as well. I think those were the two comments: adhering to the schedule, trying to minimize disruption to the neighborhood during the construction period. And I think the tone is, as I understood it, as I observed it, was, I think, quite positive. But really wanting to make sure, let's get this done, let's get it done hopefully by the end of the year and minimize disruption.
Okay. Any other questions of staff?
Through the chair to
Go ahead.
Rico, go ahead.
go on what Councilman Ibarra said. So what was there any response or suggestions as far as the weekday work versus non-weekend, as far as the time frame and how we can foresee and the developer can see themselves keeping on the time frame so everybody has peace of mind?
Councilmember, that would be, we would expect a condition of approval in the architectural review resolution. So as we go forward to the Planning Commission and discuss the actual implementation of constructing these replacement homes, we would talk at that time about schedule. As I indicated to one of the residents that was here, it would be very standard and typical for us to put a condition of approval that clarifies for all parties, staff, the developer, and the residents, what those hours would be. At this point in time, based on the feedback we heard, the intent would be to work with the developer to have the construction activity during weekdays, not weekends and holidays.
Michael?
I should also point out, Mr. Mayor and council members, that Steve Garrett is here as a representative of the Castle Companies, and additionally, he could respond to any questions that you may have.
Okay. Michael?
Thank you. Mark, I had a few questions on your part, mostly around, the implications of the language. So when we use the word replacement home versus project, I saw that was consistently changed. So what is the real implication of calling these replacement homes versus new constructions?
I think there were a couple of considerations. The first one was, as I mentioned before, that backing up, these are replacement homes. These are not. This isn't a new subdivision, and we wanted to make sure that it was clear in the development agreement that this is simply a concerted effort to replace homes that were there before the explosion. So that was really one of the main motivating factors. Second of all, as I mentioned, the developer had requested a condition in the development agreement, which was in previously, and is still in there now, which says that as each home is sold, we can terminate the development agreement with respect to that home, in effect treating each home as a separate entity. And we wanted to make sure that it was clear throughout the development agreement that we didn't hung up on the language whereby the development agreement applies to some unified project, and then for some reason that creates a problem in terminating with respect to each home individually. So those were two of the factors that led us to want to make that change throughout. It's also consistent with the environmental document that's being filed, or documents that are being filed. That was actually one of the questions at the Planning Commission meeting, what kind of environmental review, and the answer is these homes are categorically exempt, just as all single-family homes are and were in the neighborhood. And so we wanted to make sure that this wasn't treated as some sort of unified development for purposes of CEQA. So there were a number of issues that prompted us to want to make that change.
So if all the building permits are issued in May and they're all going to be constructed in 6 months, why would they want to stagger it essentially becomes a project. They're all starting at the same time, they're all ending at the same time. I'm not understanding why there's a motivation to not treat it as a project.
One of the reasons was that 4 of the homes have difficult conditions on their lots, and so the developer wanted additional time to make sure that those homes could be treated separately if there were geotechnical issues that came up. So in effect, what the developer is going to be doing is building the 6 homes that are relatively unconstrained, and then there are some constraints which there's still some uncertainty about on 4 of the lots. We wanted to make sure that we could treat each one of them separately.
And so what disadvantage would the builder have in keeping the contract, or basically keeping this alive for the properties that were completed? I mean, it's a very short span of time. I'm not understanding why that's an important
Right, and I may not be fully understanding your question. What happens is when the escrow closes, the title company wants to be able to pass clear title to the buyer without being encumbered by the obligations of the development agreement. And so that's why at every close of escrow, it's anticipated that the city would send something to the title company saying, development agreement is terminated with respect to this home.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to address the council on this matter? If we close the public hearing, okay.
Terry Peterson, Scenic Court, Mr. Mayor and City Council. This is an amazing project. It shows the council and staff working together with a developer to do these replacement homes in an almost unbelievably quick schedule. That's going to benefit the neighborhood. It's going to put new homes in place that will raise the property values of the remaining homes that are already there. And nothing can erase the explosion, but this will tend to reunify the neighborhood. I've seen a lot of projects. I've been involved in construction, reconstruction, new construction, my whole life, and it's unusual to see a city respond so significantly, so quickly, and in such a unified way. I think in a way the small attendance at this meeting is due to a couple factors. One, there were a lot of neighbors at the Planning Commission meeting, and they did have a lot of comments, and I think staff did a great job of addressing them. And there were genuine concerns and genuine replies. But also, I think the small number of people here tonight reflects the fact that the bulk of the community recognizes that this was underway, and they felt very positive about it. And so I want to say personally, as a longtime resident of the city, I'm very happy to see it go forward, and I appreciate your efforts very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor Wan, members of the council, I'm Steve Garrett with the Castle Companies. I'd like to thank staff for the presentation this evening and for all the efforts that have taken place to date, both on the agreement that's before you here this evening and on the design review and on the neighborhood meeting, which we've been arranging. I just want to briefly say that we're looking forward to this opportunity to build these replacement homes in the Crestmore neighborhood, and we have an upcoming meeting with the neighbors. We realize it's going to be unique in that these are replacement homes in different lots in different parts of the neighborhood, and it's going to require a lot of coordination, and we're going to make every effort to work with the neighborhood constructively to do that. And we're also going to be answering a lot of questions for them that they have regarding a schedule. We do believe we can get the homes built on the schedule that we have in the agreement. We don't intend to work weekends. We seldom, as a company, work weekends. There may be occasions where we might need to, but those arrangements will be made in advance, and we will also do that with the city to make sure we're complying with local ordinances as to hours and working hours and those sorts of things if and when that need arises. But we do look forward to the opportunity, and I'd like to thank Mr. Zaffarano for the presentation and the one question about the development agreement and reconveying the agreement as the replacement homes are completed. One of the reasons for it, the main reasons we asked, is that when a consumer comes to purchase the new home and a mortgage lender, which most of the homes will have conventional consumer mortgages on them, that lender typically will not allow an exception that's as complex as this agreement, just sort of sitting on title for an indefinite period of time. So in order for us to sell and close the home with the new home buyer, we need to have that reconveyed and removed, which is another reason for documenting it the way that we've asked that it be documented. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for the developer? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to address the council? If we close the public hearing, you're going to be precluded from talking to us about this item again.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second to close the public hearing on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Discussion or action by the council?
One last question. What is considered, what is the legal term or this official term of certificate of occupancy? So what is actually, that's the completed house?
Right. The intent of the certificate of occupancy is that the utilities have been provided, the construction is completed, and the home can be occupied by a household. It's ready for occupancy, legal occupancy.
Could there still be an open permit on it? Building permit?
Typically
Could
not.
it look unfinished?
No, typically it's a finished home. Not to say that there couldn't be what we refer to as a temporary certificate of occupancy, but with a certificate of occupancy, the home is complete and ready for occupancy, period.
Okay. Anything else? Action by the council?
Mr. Chair, Let's see what
This would be a motion to introduce the ordinance.
I,
Waive the first reading.
Excuse me, waive first reading and then, yes.
We'll help you out.
I'll make a motion to waive the first reading of the ordinance.
Second?
Motion second to waive the first reading. Question? All in favor?
Aye. And I will introduce the ordinance for adoption.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell. Aye. Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item number 9, public comment on items not on this agenda. It is the council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and interaction where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Would anyone like to address the council? Mr. Rico?
Robert Rico, 7th Avenue. I'm here to speak real quickly on 2 items. As a chamber member, I want to thank the mayor for participating in the recent installation of chamber officers, but more importantly for his very extensive, detailed State of the City address. And I've just learned that there are various times that you can see this replayed on Channel 1. So you can go on. They are running a slide. I'm not going to go over the times, but his speech will be run numerous times between now and the end of the month. The second hat that I'm wearing tonight is I'm on the planning committee for Relay for Life San Bruno 2015, and would just like to advise everyone in attendance here and watching tonight that the kickoff event for this year's event will be Thursday, February 5th, between 6:30 and 8:30, and we are holding it at YouTube. We are not finalized all the information yet, so if you watch sanbrunopatch.com, you'll be able to see further details, and I'm sure it'll be on Facebook and a few of the others. So,
Thank you, Robert. Item number 10, conduct of business. We have 3 items this evening. A is adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract for the Crestmore Glenview Neighborhood Reconstruction Utility Sanitary Sewer Lateral Replacement Project with JMB Construction, Inc. in the amount of $1,216,180 and approving a construction budget of $1,816,376. Harry? Push the button there, Harrison.
Oh, sorry about that.
Introduce yourself again. Start all over.
Apologize. I'm Harry Burrows, and I'm the city's project manager for the Crestmore Reconstruction neighborhood. So tonight, before you is the award of a construction contract to J&B Construction for the sewer lateral project, upper sewer laterals within the neighborhood. Also wanted to provide an update to City Council tonight on the overall status of the sewer lateral program as well. And I'm going to apologize in advance as some of the numbers that I'll be presenting here tonight are slightly different than what is in your staff report. This is a fluid project. We're constantly seeking new information from the residents as far as trying to get their intention of whether they're going to do the work, the replacement work themselves, or have the city do it. So we're updating that information fairly constantly. What I wanted to do was start out and just give an overview as a reminder of the sanitary sewer program itself, and that's what's shown here on the board. The program was authorized by the City Council on October 22nd of 2013, and it laid out 3 different options for homeowners. They could either replace the upper lateral on their own and seek reimbursement from the city, providing the detail that was specified in the program. The owners could elect for the city to replace the upper laterals as a city project, which is the item before you tonight, or the owners could elect to not participate in the lateral program at all. I think it's important to also remind ourselves of what the eligibility requirements were for the reimbursement program. And essentially, all owners within the neighborhood were or are eligible for the reimbursement with 2 exceptions, and that is owners who replaced their upper laterals prior to September 9 of 2010, and then owners whose homes were completely rebuilt after the fire from September 9, 2010. And the reason for that second exception is the assumption that I believe was discussed here by the City Council was that the cost for the replacement of those homes who burned down, their upper laterals, was included as part of their reconstruction costs, their settlement with the insurance company and/or PG&E. So over the course of the last 12-plus months, staff has performed significant outreach to the neighborhood regarding the program. At least 2 mailers have been sent to property owners. At least 1 mailer was hand-delivered to owners who we had not received responses from. In several instances, or multiple instances, second and third hand-delivered notices have been placed on those homes. In addition, we have put notices on the website. The website includes email blasts to about 190 interested parties, most of whom are residents of the neighborhood, regarding the program. And we've had additionally one-on-one meetings with a lot of folks to discuss what the lateral replacement means specifically for their project up in the neighborhood. As a result of that, we identified at the time 163 private laterals to be replaced as a city project. There were 163 homeowners indicated that they wanted the city to perform this work. So we proceeded, put together a fairly extensive bid package. The bid package included details of each individual home and what the existing utilities were, where the laterals were, where the cleanouts were. It's a very extensive bid package. Included in that is actually each property owner will get this form that they will sign off on prior to the work, agreeing that this is the work that will be performed in terms of the surface restoration, what will have to be damaged or replaced on their property. And then at the end of the construction, they will also sign the form agreeing that the work has been done to their satisfaction. So that bid package was put together throughout the late summer and early fall, was put out to bid in November, and bids were opened in December, early December. In the staff report, there's some additional detail. The city determined that the lowest responsive bidder was JMB Construction. There was actually another bid that was submitted that was lower. However, upon review of that bid, it was incomplete, and so the city deemed that bid non-responsive. Since the preparation of the bid package and the bid opening, we have received an additional interest from additional 40 residents, property owners, who have indicated their desire to have the city perform the work. So I think taking a look at the overall status of the lateral program is important. And again, these are some numbers that are slightly different that was in the staff report, but I think a couple things are worth noting. To date, we have processed 44 requests for reimbursement, and we're anticipating, based upon the feedback that we've gotten, that there's another 26 residents who will be doing the work on their own and submitting for reimbursement. The number of owners who now want the city to perform the replacement have increased from the original 163 to 203, so an additional 40. That's 9 more than was indicated in the staff report. And I think of great importance and significance is we've, over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks, really put on a full court press to try to outreach the owners that are in the undecided, undetermined category that's listed there, and that number has decreased, as you can see, from 46 down to 18. So many of those owners have either decided for the city to replace, some of them we've deemed ineligible, and others have decided to replace them on their own. So what we're asking for the council tonight, we're recommending that the council authorize the award of the base contract to JMB in the amount of, adjusted amount of $1.216 million. Again, the details provided in the staff report. Their bid was about $5,900 higher than that, but they had a few math errors in their bid. When we did the tabulations, the correct bid amount is shown here, and JMB agrees to that bid amount. We've also are recommending that a construction budget be authorized, and the construction budget obviously would include the base bid amount, would include cost to construct the additional 40 laterals, would also include a construction contingency above that of 10% of the base bid amount, and then would include contract, city administration, inspection, and testing cost, for a total construction budget of $1.879 million as shown there. The other thing that staff is recommending is that we put in place a hard deadline of March 1st of this year for owners to respond. If I go back to this previous slide, you can see that between the undecided category, undetermined, and the non-responsive to date, we've got a total of 18 and 17 of 35 of those. So we have drafted a letter, and it's will be sent out most likely tomorrow or the next day via registered mail, certified mail, to those owners, giving them a hard deadline of the end of this month to respond, so that we know where they are, what their intentions are with this program. The March 1st deadline we think is realistic from the standpoint of if they indicate by March 1st that they want to be included in the city program, we'll have an adequate amount of time to negotiate those laterals with JMB, get a firm price, and include that work in their contract. If we go beyond that, we're really pushing the limits and it doesn't become feasible. Further, we think that since the initial program was approved and the number of notices that have been sent out to the owners, over the course of then it would be 15 plus months, that's a more than adequate time for owners to respond. And then I just threw these pictures up there just to give the audience and the council an idea of some of the issues that are involved with some of the lateral replacements. The photo to the right shows some of the stuff that we're pulling out of the ground in terms of the existing sewer system. It's up there. You can see it's fairly bad shape. And then the other two photos just show some of the surface restoration that's involved, particularly when we have to do some open cut for these projects. So that concludes my presentation here, and I'm available to answer any questions the council may have.
Any questions for Harry? Ken?
Harry, in the beginning, what were we considering as far as an average replacement? What is the going rate to replace a sewer lateral?
Oh, a dollar amount?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think originally we had a range because it's, some are simple where we can just do trenchless construction underneath lawn, to, as you can see here in these photos, open trench across, whether it's pavers or other things. So the range on the low end is about 3,000, and on the high end up to 12,000.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that question is because I did the math and everything, and we're at about an average of about $7,000.
Correct.
For now, 193 of the properties. So I think it's a good number, and considering, because that's what I was really concerned about when we started this program, was those few properties where the restoration was going to be a problem.
Correct.
And so I'm assuming that with all your documentation and correspondence with these property owners, that they know exactly what they're going to be receiving and ending up with after the installation.
Yes, that has been sort of the challenge of putting together this bid package, is to make sure that we define that and get agreement with the property owner in terms of what that surface restoration is going to be.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any action by the council?
I'll introduce the resolution.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item 10B.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
before you go on, I just wanted to add one comment, and that is, as Mr. Burrows indicated at the beginning of his comments, this has been a somewhat fluid process as we have attempted to make contact and then work with each of the residents in the neighborhood to determine what process best suits their individual needs. We still have some number of persons declining, but some number of persons who we have either not been able to contact or remain undecided, and again, that number is declining. But in the event that the funds that Harry has carefully evaluated and included in your action tonight are not sufficient to meet the demand from those that are currently undecided or unavailable to consult with us, and we learn quickly in the next 30 days that they are interested in joining on to this project, we'd just like to have said to you that that would be a reason, and probably the only reason, that we would need to return to you for additional appropriation.
Good, understood. Item 10B, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the contract with West Yost Associates for construction management and inspection services for the Water Pump Station Number 4 College project in the amount of $29,633.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. My name is Will Anderson, Staff Engineer, Public Services Department. Construction of the new water pump station number 4 on College Drive at Skyline Boulevard is nearing completion. The project is the second most critical water system improvement listed in the Water Master Plan and serves as the only source of water to Pressure Zone 11, an area that includes Skyline College and the surrounding neighborhoods. Due to the complexity of the project, Council authorized the execution of contract back in September 2014 for construction management services with West Yost Associates to monitor the structural, mechanical, electrical, and piping installations. The cost of their initial contract was approximately $170,000. The proposed amendment will increase the contract amount by $29,633 for a total contract amount of approximately $200,000. The additional costs are required to continue management and inspection of the project until it is completed because we have fallen behind schedule on the construction schedule. But overall project costs are currently within budget and are forecasted to remain so. We're about 4 months behind schedule, primarily because of 2 unforeseen changes. The first being the new electrical service changing from overhead to underground, and the second being increasing the 2-day operational test period of the station to a 30-day time period prior to the city taking ownership of the station. For the electrical service, the plans as bid showed an overhead electrical feed to the new station. The service installation drawings were received from PG&E after construction started, and they showed an underground installation instead. This is actually a better design because an underground service would be less subject to corrosion in the consistently foggy areas at the site. So we had to develop a trenchless installation across Skyline Boulevard. The city obtained an encroachment permit from Caltrans for the crossing of Skyline, and the contractor negotiated with the private property owner across the street on Berkshire Drive to allow for placement of boring pits. All of this resulted in a 10-week time extension to the project. The 30-day test period was increased from the initial 2-day test period in the plans per city request to more thoroughly test the station under a range of operating conditions before the city takes ownership of the station. The proposed contract extension will allow for West Yost to continue their current construction management duties until project completion, and it is anticipated that this will be the first and last amendment to their contract. The additional money is available within the Water Enterprise Fund, and it is recommended that council approve the contract amendment for construction management and inspection with West Yost. That's the end of my presentation.
All right.
Open to questions.
Thank you, Will. Any questions? Ken?
What was the original length of the project?
1 year.
1 year. So now we're 1 year, 4 months.
Correct.
So take me back. If you'd known, and I'm finding it very surprising that you would not know what the electrical service is, whether it's overhead or underground. And for one, is that something that should have been caught? That's going to be my first reaction. The second is, what if we did catch it early on? How different would that have made the project? Would there still have been a delay? Would there, would this construction schedule be lengthened because of this change in the electrical service?
Well, to answer the first part, when we made the initial service application, PG&E asked us when the service would be required. So the thought was, we're going to need service once the project is out of the ground, the electrical components are in place, and we need to power up the station. But the question probably should have been, when was PG&E's design required, so that we could have planned accordingly, by installing the appropriate conduits, including it in the bid docs. There was some miscommunications between us and PG&E.
Also, Councilmember Rivera, the existing station across the street, that has an overhead power. So during the design, the conceptual design, it was assumed that the same power would be extended over. So we didn't really consider any alternatives. And usually what you do is you start the project, and at some point during the design, you send the package to PG&E. And by the time PG&E gets to it and starts the actual design, all these constraints and other variables do not come into play.
Okay, so the second part of my question is that if we had known that this was going to be an underground service, I guess assuming that it is a little more involved than just shifting an overhead line, now you're putting it underground. Does that logically extend the construction?
It would actually, because you actually have to have all the equipment prepared on the receiving side in order to be able to do you could do some parallel connection, but the thing is that usually PG&E comes in and does the design, and they want to do it in one shot, do the connection in one shot. We could have done some in parallel. For example, maybe we could have done the boring and just put a conduit in and then pull the wires later, but part of it would have been extending the construction as we are now.
And just trying to understand what $30,000 in additional construction management is. Is he just sitting around waiting for you to finish things up for him to look at, or is there additional work for them for Yoast to be doing?
It is additional work. West Yoast has been excellent in providing us with support, and every dollar that we spent with them, have spent with them in the past, has been useful. They have one of the best inspections that we've ever seen on any other projects, and we're very happy with what they're providing, especially with this very essential and crucial pump station. We wanted to make sure everything is done per specifications, and electrical is one of the biggest obstacles that we had to overcome.
Okay.
Any other question, Rico?
Sure. So, because of the miscommunication, the project designer then made an assumption on how it was going to go, and this is one of the issues that we're having here that's before us this evening, for the additional costs, correct? Or am I saying that wrong?
Due to the assumptions that weighed at the beginning of the project, during the preliminary design, we make certain assumptions. What is the condition of the soil? What is the condition of the electrical? What is the connections going to be? And at every point, those assumptions will be tested out in the field. For example, there's a big storm pipe underneath here, and we had to make that assumption. At some point, what are we going to do during the design? We had to make some changes because our original assumptions were not correct. So all of this is part of starting from the conceptual design to the final design. These assumptions will get impacted, and some of them actually will be tested during the construction. You start doing the piers, you don't know. You make an assumption that there's certain kind of geotechnical condition underneath, but when you actually drill the pier, you may encounter underwater springs, you may encounter underwater conditions that are very different.
Okay, so in hindsight, looking back, now knowing what we know as we sit here this evening, what would you suggest, or what better could we have done or can do in the future so that the miscommunications or assumptions that are made based on those don't find themselves rearing their head again?
That's an excellent question. Like you said, we
Thank
need
you.
to learn. We need to learn. And as we work with these consultants, these are the best experts we have in the field. There are so many different variables that we have to consider and options. So in the future, one of the things that we can do is have it's not a normal procedure, for example, for PG&E to have a pre-design conference. They normally don't get into their design people, don't really get the package until well into the project in order to provide the service. So for this part, we can look at other alternatives that might impact the schedule or the cost in terms of utilities that is not under our control. We could be more proactive in working with them and trying to push them to sit down with us and actually look at alternatives for providing different kind of service, including the power to the project.
Michael?
Through the chair. So one thing I'm trying to understand, so had we known in the very beginning that the power was going to be undergrounded, would the project have cost the same that we're paying now, or are we paying more as a penalty for having discovered it later?
It would have been an additional cost. Either we pay it up front as part of the bid, we probably get a slightly lower cost to that effect, but, you know, because it was discovered during construction, it is an added cost, and it's probably higher than what we would have paid for had it been included in the bid.
But we can assume that the initial bid, had we known that, probably would have been close to this 199,000, or at least higher than the 169,000 that was originally proposed.
Yeah, the cost that we want to address, we have a consultant cost that's before you, and this is the cost of the construction management portion. We also have the construction cost, which is total of $2.5 million. That included only the overhead connection of the power. So what's before you is the additional cost we're incurring just for the construction management, not the actual construction.
So if we had known, everything that we should have known in the beginning, what would the bid, the construction management bid, have been closer to the 199 or somewhat close to that 199?
That is correct.
Okay.
It would have been closer to the 199 number because of the amount of time it takes and the extent of the complexity of what exactly will be reviewed. Mostly is a time impact. That's how construction management is designed, basically.
Okay.
When you come up with the number, it depends on the staffing and the length of time.
Right. And that's kind of what I was trying to get to, is that we're not really paying that much of a penalty for having missed it. It's just what it costs. If we had found it up front, we still would have agreed to pay it up front rather than backing into it at this point.
You're correct.
Okay. Now, as far as the 30-day extension, how come we didn't know that one up front?
Well, the bid docs only included a 2-day operational test period, and I guess that one, to be honest, it just kind of slipped through the cracks. I guess there were just 2 volumes worth of specifications, and we couldn't really catch everything. But here again, we're kind of catching it later in the game. Even though it did slip through the cracks, it didn't shatter on the floor at this point. So I think it's time well spent so we can fully test all the components in the station over a lengthy period and under various operating conditions. So here again, it was an oversight.
Is there a test plan that's out there somewhere that kind of runs through all the tests that need to happen and whether there's a duration to each one of those tests?
Yes, there are specific procedures for, the electrical, the pumps, even the chlorine analyzers. There's just lots of bits and pieces within the station, and they are all being thoroughly tested prior to the city taking ownership of the station.
Okay. I mean, it's not our first well, so I'm surprised we missed that one. That one seems kind of obvious. Right? We've run through these tests with other wells when they were
Pump station.
pump station. Right. Pump
Right.
station.
This is actually the largest pump stations that we ever built in the city, and it's much more complex than the other pump stations we've had. So the amount of testing for this particular pump station, we want to make sure we don't leave any room for error. Want to do a complete testing, and this period would be very crucial to our staff to make sure that the pump station will be operating. This pump station is going to take water up to tanks 9 and 10 up in Skyline, and it's going to be very crucial, especially it's so close to the San Andreas Fault, and the amount of capacity that the motors have with the connection with the vicinity of the fault is going to be very important to our operations. So we want to make sure we do it correctly.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Action by the council?
I'll introduce the resolution.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item 10C, we're going to receive an oral report from the city clerk on attendance at the city clerk's new law and election seminar in Monterey, California, Wednesday, December 3rd through Friday, December 5th, 2014. Carol?
Mayor and Council, I attended the 2015 City Clerk's New Law and Election Seminar back in the beginning of December. Our first session was engaging residents in the digital age. Understanding what tomorrow's community members look like is going to be critical for governments struggling to connect with an audience that wants instant feedback. They stress the importance of outreach, such as town hall meetings, citywide surveys, social media. This outreach can help find out what matters most and help to set priorities for cities. There was a session on information management and the challenge of technology. Clerks, as manager of the records, must understand the role of technology, which will help them develop expertise in how information is managed. The last session of the first day was on leader credibility and understanding the core credibility. Credibility is not inherent, it's earned. We were divided into groups to do exercises on how to improve. And Vanja Rose, that used to work here for us, was the leader of the entire session. Thursday's first session dealt with new law and FPPC updates. There were only minor changes to Form 700. The gift limit increased to 460 from 440, and it'll be that way through 2016. SB 29 is going to allow vote-by-mail ballots to be counted up to 3 days after an election. And then effective January 1st, 2015, city clerks are allowed to perform marriages. However, it's not mandatory, and they're not allowed to charge a fee. And incidentally, our mayor can perform marriages as well as the city clerk. Also, we were reminded about conflicts of interest, which prompted me to ask that you all do your AB 1, 2, 3, 4s. The Thursday afternoon session dealt with initiatives and referendums which repeal an ordinance or a resolution. Ironically, when I returned on that Friday, a lady called very, very concerned about how many people she needed to do for a referendum petition. And city measures need 15% of the registered voters on a special election and 10% for a regularly scheduled municipal election. County measures need 20%, and in this past election, they would have needed 31,000 valid signatures for a petition to get on the ballot. The plus of these conferences that I've attended over the last number of years is is the ability to network with other city clerks, and they're so helpful for me with my job because there's nobody else that really knows the job. So I'd like to thank you and be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carol. Any questions for Carol? Good. Glad you had a good time. Item 11, report of commissions, boards, and committees. There aren't any this evening. Comments from council members?
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor.
Ken?
I wrote it out because I want to make it clear. I'd like to ask the city manager to direct staff to review the various placements of these so-called collection boxes. You see them, they're either pink or they're green, and they ask for charity, so to speak, to place used clothes or used items. I want to specifically look at any and all the boxes that are located on non-private properties, and then those that are located on private property to make sure that they're not located in the right-of-way. And I know personally for a fact that there are 2 on Genevan that are in the right-of-way. In addition, I'd like, and I just noticed it just yesterday, I realize that we have some abandoned buildings and things, and they have chain link fences, and those are just canvases for these event signs. And I think we, as elected officials, when we used to really do a lot of signs, we used to obey the laws. And so now we have these out-of-town events that are plastering chain link fences with numerous signs. And you can just see it right there at the Lee's Buffet, and they, in about 100 feet of fencing, they've placed about, I'd say about 15 signs on that fence. And so it's very distracting, and just like to have, this sign ordinance complied with. Thank you.
Any other comments? Closed session. We already had a closed session before this meeting. Item number 14 is adjournment. The next regular city council meeting will be held here on January 27th, 2015. Meeting adjourned.